Welcome to the From Harm to Healing podcast. I'm your host, Chris Jones, and I'm a therapist who runs the From Harm to Healing treatment program, an online program for men who have engaged in infidelity or compulsive sexual behaviors within the context of an intimate relationship. I started this podcast to illuminate some of the common blind spots within the treatment fields for compulsive sexual behavior or sex addiction through the lens of the deceptive sexuality trauma model. I hope you find this resource enlightening, particularly if you're somebody navigating the pain of betrayal and deception for yourself. Thank you for listening to the From Harm to Healing podcast.
All right, I'm excited, Chris. Coffee with Chris again. I love it. My favorite things, Starbucks and Chris Jones.
How would you rather spend your days?
Yes, and I support you 100%, 110. So keep going, Chris Jones. Bring it to the UK. Yes, people need illumination. They need to see that, hey, whoa, infidelity, two-part problem, not just sex. Whoa, integrity abuse. Wow, traumatic impacts, people upstairs getting harmed. Wow, yeah, that's a good thing. So you're doing such a good thing, Chris Jones. So keep going. Let's create extraordinary space and let's talk about the 5 reasons the voice is the main instrument of healing from the secret sexual basement. So you ready to meet me in extraordinary space, Chris Jones?
Absolutely.
All right, let's do it. On the count of 3 is our transition. You ready? 1, 2, 3. Inhale. And exhale.
So in the conversations you and I have been having, and also the conversation I had with Trish as well, we've really covered some of the key topics. We've gone over some of the major points of the model. And so we've looked at the treatment for the person that built the secret sexual basement or the abuser, and particularly looked through the lens of the 3 I's: integrity, intimacy, integration, as a way of thinking about healing. I talked particularly with Trish about the idea of the partner or the victim and what healing might look like through the stages for them. You and I have talked about attending work and how that relates to potential relational repair. And then we've also had some really beautiful conversations about healthy masculinity and what that looks like, the honest, loving whole, the idea of the man box breaking down. So today is a good opportunity, I think, to zoom out a little bit, tie it all together, think bigger picture, and then particularly be bringing in this idea of the voice, this central clinical instrument that ties everything together. So I'd love to just hand over to you and to hear you start to share that with us, start to look at that bigger picture.
All right. So I know you have some listeners who've been educated in a sequence, which is great. And so now we're at a point where I can summarize, right? There's 5 stages of treatment: deceptive sexuality and trauma treatment. 5 stages as a way to organize the brain. 3 to 5 years of treatment. That's a long time. How do we organize that? What's that going to look like? What can we expect? How do you take this model of the secret sexual basement? And Dr. Minwalla, how do you organize treatment? And I would say, well, there's 5 stages. Stage 1, assessment, diagnosis, and an initial treatment plan, which keeps being reassessed over time and adapted over time as you move through the stages. So stage 1, ADT, a proper assessment of a 2-part problem, diagnosis, naming the A word, right? Naming the V word. There's diagnoses for psychological abuse and intimate partner abuse in the DSM. That would all be part of stage 1, is just naming the problem clearly. And what's the plan for everybody? And then stage 2, stabilization, safety, a space to do that work, and reducing the abuse. That's the first thing, is creating a healthy foundation of honesty and justice. Honesty and justice. Often a formal disclosure is happening. That takes a while. There's going to be an increase of traumatic symptoms after a disclosure. So we have to restabilize after that. So stage 2 takes a while. Stabilization, reducing abuse, and creating a foundation of truth, intentionally accurate, authentic reality, and justice. Everybody's treating everybody fairly. No more manipulation, no more lying. So that's stage 2. When everyone's stabilized, now we can go into the 22 rooms and eat elephant. That's metabolization is stage 3. When everyone is stabilized, has resources, a space to eat elephant, you need a conscious, dignifying circle or space to eat elephant. And so when everyone has all of those resources and people who know how to do restorative, reparative holding, then you can step into metabolization, helping people take a piece of reality, this abuse victim trauma reality, and digest it, metabolize it, work through it, process it in a healthy way, and get to photosynthesis oxygen, stage 4 and 5, that organic, healthy rebound and post-traumatic growth, which leads to a bigger story, emancipation, movement beyond the story, and empowerment. Actually, now what didn't kill you made you stronger, and you can give that strength to other people. That's vibing out. So there's a 5-stage model here. If we understand this term abuse victim trauma reality, that's been in the dark, right? Nobody sees the A word abuse. Nobody sees the V word victim. Nobody sees the T word trauma. When we think of infidelity, we don't think AVT. So we call that reality the gigantic elephant in the room. And in this model, we're simply helping people see that elephant, illumination. Hey, there's abuse. It's a 2-part problem. And there's people getting hurt upstairs. Those are the victims. And there's 22 impacts at least in a covert phase. Those are the traumatic impacts. AVT is a reality that exists. You can look at it or not, but turning away from the truth doesn't make it go away. So metaphorically, the 5 stages: name the elephant, tame the elephant, eat the elephant, photosynthesis, and oxygen. Name the elephant, tame the elephant, eat the elephant, photosynthesis, and oxygen. That's another way to look at the 5 stages. All right, Chris, let's take a deep breath on all of that, because I'm going to keep going on now to the real hand. So you ready? On the count of 3, 1, 2, 3, inhale. And exhale. All right, put that aside. 5 stages. But Dr. Minwalla, all right, that's the process in the big picture. Those are the 5 treatment stages. So that's great. Thank you. And it makes it easier. Name, tame, eat, photosynthesis, oxygen. So that's all great. However, what's the main instrument? What's the main way that people actually heal and change? What's the essence of what everybody needs to be doing in those 5 stages? Could you kind of give us another way to see things? Yes, I can, actually. And I have an answer. And it really does, again, help organize the brain. So there's 5 stages to treatment and healing. And the key instrument for everybody, the abuser, the victim, the relationship, society, everybody, the key instrument that's going to heal deceptive sexuality and trauma is the voice, the human voice. That's the instrument. It's organic. You could be stranded on a deserted island and you could do all this healing because you don't need fancy machines. You don't need to plug into anything. In fact, you have to unplug from technology and learn how to vibe in and create those conscious, dignifying circles. So the main thing you need to heal is the voice. And clinicians can really focus on the voice as, oh, this is the instrument that's going to really help everybody. And again, the number five. The number five again comes in. There's five key, top, so important ways that the voice is important.
And for those that perhaps aren't aware, just to add in that this links back to the white paper you recently released on your website that talks about the 5 key ways that the voice is the primary clinical instrument. So this is really following on from that white paper for those that want more information. But this is just a great segue now into breaking that down. What are those 5 ways that the voice is the key instrument?
For the abuser, number 1. For the survivor, number 2. For the relationship as a third entity healing, the voice is so important, number 3. For coming out of toxic masculinity, number 4. And for all of us as bystanders in society, including in the therapeutic field, number 5, how do we use our voice? How does the abuser get better using his voice? How does the survivor get better using their voice? How does the relationship heal using their voices? How does masculinity heal? By using our voice instead of violence. And then how do we all move forward by not being silent when we see the abuse of the secret sexual basement, but speak up? Hey, there's more to the picture here. There's an abuse situation going on. There's victims, people upstairs getting hurt, and there's trauma going on. So what prevents us from speaking up? Why do we become frozen and scared to speak up? And what is that about? And how do we unfreeze our voice and learn how to speak up and find the courage to speak up and blow the whistle? Hey, there's abuse here. And be strong and stand in truth rather than being scared. Nobody wants to use the A word. Professionals scared of the A word, literally taking leadership positions on partners of sex addicts and training professionals and intentionally avoiding the A word. That's wrong. You shouldn't be assuming leadership positions. So how do you alpha up? So there's 5 ways the voice is so important. It's the key way to heal. How do you heal secret sexual basement? The voice. Number 1 for the abuser, moving from dishonesty to honesty. The number 1 treatment goal for the abuser, the person who built the basement, is making and helping them as a clinician, as a society, helping them become honest. That's the treatment goal, moving from someone whose problem was dishonesty for years to now becoming an honest person, an honest parent, and an honest partner, and an honest citizen in society. What's been the problem? Dishonesty. What's the solution? Honesty. What's been the problem? Dishonesty. What's the solution? Honesty. More than a sex plan. 30 years of dishonesty? Where's the treatment plan for that? Where's the treatment plan for that? That's a question to be answered, right? Where's the treatment plan for the dishonesty? 30 years of dishonesty. Don't tell me you don't need a treatment plan. And the treatment plan's not just be honest now. You don't just say to someone, oh, just be honest now, and that's the treatment plan. You can do a lot more, right? So in this model, the person who built the basement, their number 1 goal is I need to be honest, which means I need to learn how to use my voice to speak honestly. And every word, every vibration, my goal is to try as hard as I can. It's not going to be easy to be intentionally accurate and authentic IAR. Those are the vibrations the partner and the people who've been harmed need to register in their brain. And the brain has detectors scanning the human voice for truth. The brain already has apparatus to detect truth in the human voice. So now, with hypervigilance anyone who's been harmed with dishonesty is going to be really attuned to, am I being manipulated? Is this IMR in their voice or IAR? So the biggest treatment goal, not just for the abuser, for the survivor, the relationship, the number one treatment goal in an abuse problem is reduce the abuse, which is the dishonesty. The number one treatment goal for the survivor is protect them from abuse, which is dishonesty, and provide safety from abuse, which is IMR and dishonesty. So everybody needs to start a dishonesty program and move into honesty. And the acronyms I use is intentionally manipulated reality to intentionally accurate, authentic reality. That's the treatment goal for the abuser, the survivor, the relationship, and everybody. Let's move out of IMR towards IAR. Let's move out of dishonesty towards honesty. That's the treatment trajectory for everybody. Everybody now needs to move towards progressive honesty and get out of this system for 30 years of systemic gaslighting and IMR. That's the injury. That's the problem. So for the abuser, I have this whole idea of voice up, learning how to use the human voice to speak honestly. And so we practice literally as a muscle that needs to be developed. How do you work out this muscle? That's called voicing up, and it's part of treatment.
And it feels like that ties in so clearly with the three I's, or the honest, loving, whole, integrity, intimacy. So using the voice as the primary tool of sharing integrity, sharing authenticity, just really fits with everything we've already discussed. And so now maybe moving on to, for the partner, for the victim, how does this potentially also apply, this idea of the voice as the clinical instrument?
For the survivor, wow, when they're stabilized and they really need to heal and metabolize, they're going to attach those elephant stories that are trapped inside them to the human voice. And under the right conditions, which means a conscious, dignifying space with the optimal vibrations to do restorative, reparative holding. And under that type of holding, there's an invitation for the survivor to attach their experience that they're holding inside, the traumatic experience they're holding inside, to attach it to the human voice and project it out into this safe holding container under these really optimal, intentional vibrations. And no one's interrupting. No one's interrupting. Everyone's just doing this very conscious, deliberate, focused, restorative, reparative holding. And then the person can tell their story uninterrupted in detail and get it out while they're being held like a toddler, helping them get the story out, tell us what happened while we're co-regulating, right? While we're co-regulating, reflecting back to them, not with our words, with our eyes and our intention and our holding. And so there's this really powerful surgical clinical way of helping survivors storytell and get their stories out that they're holding of what happened to them. And we hold that just like a toddler until they get it out and they're done. Yeah, beautiful. You don't have to interpret. It's not about us right now. It's about them. And now that story goes back in their body completely transformed with that experience. That's how survivors really need to heal. They need a safe place to get these stories out, and not just a quote safe place. People who really understand the story and are willing to show up and remain silent and hold in this restorative, reparative holding with intentional vibrations, and be silent for a long time. This holding. By doing that, you're also giving and communicating a high level of You're giving the person who's sharing the story, the survivor, a measure of the dignity and respect they deserve for what they've endured. And you're allowing them their day in court. And you're allowing their voice. And you're allowing the survivor to attach to their voice, her voice. That's the beginning of her ego reconstruction. That's how egos develop. That's how an infant develops, is being held in a safe container. Winnicott, the good enough mother. That's what you want to create. And then tell us what happened. Just like holding a toddler who's in distress. Tell me what happened. Help them get the story out with the co-regulation and reflection and attachment and holding. So the survivor uses their voice to reclaim, reconstruct, and find themselves again and get these stories out through the human voice. That's how the survivor heals, is being able to do this, have their story be held and respected so they can get these elephant stories out. They're walking around with trapped elephant stories with no place to go and get it out in this really beautiful way. So the survivor heals through truth telling, their truth. They need to share their story and be held and help them metabolize it. How? Through the human voice, storytelling through the human voice, being held and listened to. That's how people heal.
I've always loved that idea that trauma isn't something we fix. It's something that needs to be witnessed. It needs to be sat with, held, exactly what you're describing here. So that gives us some insight into the journey for the person that built the basement, for the abuser, the journey of the voice for the partner, for the victim. And now maybe we can also think about how does that move towards potentially the relational healing as well.
So the abusers using their voice to become honest and speak IAR, the survivors using their voice to storytell when the time is right, under the right conditions, and be held. So reason number one, how important the voice is for the person who built the basement. Reason number two, how important the voice is for healing for the survivor, the partner. And reason number three, the relationship is a third entity. First, the relationship needs to be restored to honesty and justice. So the first thing we're going to do to repair the relationship is reduce the abuse. No more lying, no more manipulation, no more IMR. Once the relationship has been restored to that baseline, honesty and justice is the foundation. Then you can work, if people want to. Some survivors want to emancipate from abuse. They don't want to do relational healing. They're out. But for those who want to do relational healing, once there's a foundation of honesty and truth established, no more abuse. That makes sense. That's ethical, APA guidelines, right? You reduce the abuse in an abusive relationship. You don't just sit there and watch it and not do anything, right? So once there's a foundation of reducing the abuse, there's a foundation of honesty and justice. Then there needs to be helping the abuser learn how to use their voice, not just to be honest, but to how to repair, how to say, I'm sorry, how to take ownership, how to take accountability using the voice. I'm sorry I did this. Actually, that was a lie. Let me correct that. That's all vocal apparatus. After learning how to be honest, you have to learn how to repair using the voice. I'm sorry, I did this, taking ownership, accountability, circling back and taking accountability for when you do lie, right? So now the voice is not just about honesty, it's about repair, ownership, and how to show up for the relationship in these advanced skills now of how to use the voice to do all of these things. How do you make amends using your voice? How do you take ownership and use responsible language instead of but this only and minimize and justify? So many of the integrity abuse behaviors, minimizing, rationalizing, are done with the voice. So the voice is, yes, it's good to be honest, but also how do I use my voice not to minimize? How do I use my voice to repair? How do I use my voice to apologize? These are vocal apparatus skills that now are on the table in treatment. It's not just being honest. That's a start. And then you have to keep helping people, especially the abuser, learn how to do all of these repair accountability skills in their voice, in their speaking. How are they showing up with their voice? Vocal ownership, accountability taking, apologizing, making amends, right? And then it doesn't stop there. There's more skills, which is then helping the abuser be authentic, the other A, not just accurate, but authentic. What does that mean? Being able to share using your voice what's going on inside the turtle, your ego, your subjective reality. And for a partner or people or children who've been hurt with a secret basement, they don't recognize the guy who built the basement. And the only way to really feel safe at the end of the day is not just honesty, but knowing who you are. And how are they going to know who you are if you can't share what's going on inside, your deep emotions, your dreams, your hopes, your fears, your hurts? Who are you actually? What are your values? How are you going to share all of that if you can't communicate with your voice? How can you be authentic? Authenticity is what's going to really help the relationship. Honesty is the first step, and then we need people really being able to share the truth of who they are. And that's what's going to really help people feel safe and attach again is, oh, now I see the real you, good, bad, and ugly, but I see the real you. And now I feel safer because now I know you. You're not a stranger or an imposter or a monster. And you go back and forth in my brain. I need to know who you really are now. So a big part of relational healing is using the voice, especially the abuser, to reveal their truth. And then the partner also, when they feel safe enough to reveal their truth. And that's where the abuser needs to be able to hold their truth. And that's where we go into really high level attending skills using that restorative, reparative holding model. How do we help the abuser hold their partner's story now? Right? She's full of elephant stories. At some point in relationship healing, she has to share those stories with the abuser, and he needs to be able to hold that so they can metabolize it together as a dyad, as a relationship, so they can go through this story together. What happened to us? Let's take a piece of elephant. Are you strong enough and able to hold me while I share the story of what happened to me? And that's relational healing. Eventually, she can hold parts of his story too, eventually later on. So everybody has to learn how to do restorative, reparative holding. It's a very, very specialized type of holding. But that's the essence of relational healing is at some point, the partner has to be able to share what happened to the relationship in her with her partner, and the partner be able to hold that elephant story with her. And now they're together in it, eating elephant together as a team. And he's showing up for her and holding, not interrupting, holding. It's a very specific type of holding, clinically and relationally. It's the same type of holding. The abuser needs to learn how to do this holding so that the partner can get her story out and they can eat elephant together. That's relational healing. So the voice is so important in relational healing. First, honesty, then authenticity. And in the middle, we have skills around repair. And then in the advanced stage of real relational healing, level stage 3, eating elephant together, is each person learning how to really hold so the other person can get the story out, and heavily emphasizing the abuser being able to hold the partner's story. And then we get to reason 4. So those are the 3 plates. The voice is so important for the abuser, the survivor, and the third plate, the relationship. The voice is essential for the abuser, the victim, survivor, and the relationship as a third entity. Those are the 3 plates. Everybody needs to fire up their voice as part of healing now, right? But it goes beyond that. One of the primary prescripts in masculinity socialization is choose violence over voice. Choose violence over voice. The basement is an example of choosing violence over voice. The truth is, the voice is the key instrument. It's provided for us. Our voice is an organic instrument on how to navigate life and relationships. We need our voice to navigate life and relationships. And the minute we're born, we should be taught that. You're going to need to learn how to use your voice to navigate life and relationships. Male socialization does the opposite. You don't need to use your voice or learn that. Just take it, do it, tell her whatever they want, lie, manipulate. It's all about conquest. It's not about using your voice at all. It's the opposite. Violence over voice, violence over voice, choose violence over voice. And so we want to flip that script. No, boys, everybody, society, choose voice over violence. That's healthy, not violence over voice. Because you're crippling boys and they have zero abilities really on how to use their voice to navigate life and relationships. If you're going to build a house with a family on top, how are you going to navigate if you can't use your voice? So all of these things get stuffed and they go in the basement. And there's all this entitlement that men and boys are socialized into, that they have a right to a basement and they can still call themselves men of integrity. I call that the masculinity hall pass. And the secret basement is actually a key blueprint of how to be a man in life. You don't need to use your voice. Just build a basement, and that's how you live life as a man. All these basements all over the world. Instead of, how do you be a man? Learn to use your voice to navigate life and relationships. How do you be a human? Learn to use your voice to navigate life and relationships. So no more basements. Use your voice. No more violence. Use your voice. Learn how to deliberate, which means long, thoughtful conversations, slow, thoughtful conversations. Learn how to negotiate. What does that mean? Talking things through to try to come up with mutually beneficial solutions. The art of negotiation, the skill of deliberation. These are all important. How to communicate, how to share hurt feelings, how to share anger, how to communicate when needs aren't being met, how to speak honestly about your triadic core, your sexuality, your gender, and your body, how to find an adult voice about all of those issues. So the whole term voice up means keep your voice upstairs, upstairs, upstairs. No more basements, upstairs. Learn how to use your voice. No more basements. And get out of this toxic script, violence over voice, and choose voice over violence. And teach your kids to choose voice over violence and give them skills on how to use their voice to navigate life, because that's what the voice is for. That's why we were given a voice. And the voice is a conduit. The voice is a conduit to share with the world your internal reality with the outside world. That's what a voice is for. It's to share your internal reality that nobody else in the universe has. And your voice is your instrument of how to share what's going on inside you with the world. What a beautiful thing. The voice is a muscle, and you can work that out to speak truth. The voice is how we attach by sharing our honesty with each other. Our voice is an instrument to point out when things are harming people and speak up and stand with them and say, hey, that's wrong. I'm not going to sit here frozen. I'm going to unlock my voice and speak up and let it speak and find the courage to say, hey, that's wrong.
And that really leads us into the fifth reason, which you briefly alluded to earlier, this idea that on that bigger societal level, there's this responsibility to use the voice to spread accuracy, to spread authenticity. And then particularly, I guess, as treatment professionals, the challenge we face in that regard, or the responsibility we potentially have in that regard as well. If you maybe want to talk some more about that.
As a bystander, when you see abuse, you can use your voice to pierce through that collusionary silence and not just watch it and let it go and stand with the perpetrator, but use your voice to stand and speak up and stand with the people getting harmed and help them by speaking to it. Hey, that's not okay to violate women for 30 years and a family for 30 years and gaslight them. That's not okay. No, sorry, that's not okay. And in fact, that's integrity abuse and systemic gaslighting, and it's a known type of abuse. And yet you still have people not using the A word, professionals not using the A word, actually teaching people, don't use the A word, don't use the A word, don't use the A word. Literally feeling entitled and assuming leadership positions. A leader is an alpha. A leader has a responsibility. If you're going to be an association of partners of sex addicts, you have a responsibility. If you're teaching professionals, you have a responsibility. You can't abrogate your responsibility. And if you know there's a type of abuse, then you have a responsibility. And if you don't know there is, like integrity abuse at this point, then you shouldn't be in that role because you're really not a leader yet, because you don't even know there's integrity abuse, which has been around for a while now. So leaders are assuming a position, and they're responsible for assuming that position. And if you assume a position and you're going to help victims and survivors of deceptive sexuality, and then you're going to intentionally teach people to ignore the abuse, that's wrong. So yeah, here I am being an alpha once again and pointing that out. That's wrong. That's not right. That's not going to help survivors by cutting out the A word intentionally and preventing professionals from learning about it or even being curious about it. Just a flat out, I don't believe in the A word. And the audacity to go around saying, I provide trauma-informed care. We're all about trauma-informed care. And you don't understand the role of integrity abuse causing complex trauma shaping in the covert phase. And when there's injury like reality ego fragmentation and the abusers in high octane integrity abuse, escalating symptoms, and you're going to intentionally take away integrity abuse as a concept and reject it, not even knowing what it is because you don't like the A word, that's wrong. You're not a leader. Step down. So yeah, that's an alpha voice right there. That's a voice, a powerful instrument for justice, truth, and change, and helping people when they're being harmed. That's not how you treat a partner, is avoid the A word. That's not good clinical work. That's not leadership. That's wrong. So what are the 5 ways that the voice is a key tool and instrument of healing from deceptive sexuality? Number 1, for the abuser, the voice needs to speak IAR. And the number 1 treatment goal is dishonesty to honesty. Dishonesty. What's the diagnosis? Dishonesty. What's the treatment? Honesty. What's the most important thing he's going to need? His voice to speak IAR. His family, kids, wife depend on IAR now. What does the survivor need? Eventually, they need a safe place under optimal conditions to be held with restorative, reparative holding so they can get the story out. These elephant stories that are trapped, and they need to get the story out with storytelling and story holding. And they need their voice. They need to reclaim their story inside with their voice. That's their story. Nobody knows it. And their voice will help them reclaim it. It's an empowerment model with their voice, storytelling and story holding, using their voice. How does the relationship heal? First, honesty, then repair, then authenticity. I have a metaphor. Mask off means helping men become authentic. Mask off. Take off the mask you've been wearing for years. When you had a basement, you were wearing a mask upstairs. Now it's your turn to take off the mask and show who you really are. That's the term I use for helping people become authentic. Mask off. MASC, mask off. And voice up. Mask off and voice up and keep it upstairs. All really good terms. Voice up, mask off, keep it upstairs. No more basements. And then how do we heal masculinity? Voice over violence, done, simple. Voice over violence, done, simple. Voice over violence, done, simple. And then as a society, when we see secret sexual basements, are we going to ignore the A word? No. If we're illuminated and wise enough, then we're going to, when we think it's appropriate, and there's so many times where it's appropriate, learn how to speak up and be an alpha and use your voice for good. That's wrong. That's not okay. People are getting harmed. And I'm going to stand with them and speak up. I'm going to stand with them and speak up. That's not right. Stand in truth. Be an alpha. Find your voice. Don't be a bystander, frozen, scared to use your voice, scared to use the A word. Scared to use the A word. Frozen. 5 reasons the voice is the key instrument for treating and healing from deceptive sexuality and trauma, right there. 5 stages of healing. 5 ways that the voice is the key instrument for healing. There you go, Chris Jones. You ready to go into ordinary space? Let's take a deep breath. You ready? 1, 2, 3, inhale. And exhale.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the From Harm to Healing podcast. If you'd like to find out more information about the deceptive sexuality trauma model itself, you can visit minwallamodel.com. If you're interested in the services that I offer, in particular the From Harm to Healing treatment program, please visit chrisjonestherapy.co.uk.